Hello everybody, this is General Yanis, and today in Death Card Tactics I'm going to be continuing looking through the stratagems, and this time the focus would be to find the best stratagems for our Terminators, where we can get the most bang for our command points, our hardly earned, our difficult to earn command points. Of course, with Taliban we can secure a bit more command points, but which stratagems are the best to use for our Terminator units? So let's get started. So today, the 18th of April, here in Denmark, the weather and COVID situation seem to be improving, and hopefully this will mean a bit more open and a bit more opportunities for a bit more Warhammer and wargaming soon. And I'm really eager to try out the new matched game lists. 2,000 points would be nice. Trying a couple of new ideas like the Terminus Est Assault Force or some other ideas than the list I tried against the Ultramarines. But it seems like whatever the list we are talking about with a new death card, it seems like Blightlord and Deathshroud Terminators are becoming a vital part of any competitive, at least, death card list. So they are really strong, they are really durable. So it seems like any list typically includes a couple of these Terminators. So in this video, I'm looking at the most efficient stratagems that can buff the Terminator's damage in the new codex, and how we can get the most bang for our CPs, how many extra wounds can be done by using various stratagems in different scenarios, where do we get most wounds for the command point spent. And I have made a couple of previous videos where I analyzed the Plague Marine stratagems and the vehicles and demon engine stratagems. So now the turn is on the Terminators, so let's take a look. The stratagems that I have been looking at this analysis that are applicable to our Terminators are: in pre-battle we have the Champion of Disease, which allows us to give relics, certain relics to the champions of the Deathshroud and the Blightlords and the Plague Marines. In the shooting phase, we have virulent rounds that can make bolters become plague weapons. Could be interesting with the combi bolters of the Blightlords. We have the Plague Brewers, special stratagem for Mortarion Sun Plague Company, where Plague Spewers and Plague Gauntlets become damage too. And this could be quite interesting for Deathshroud to buff their shooting damage with their gauntlets. We have the Overwhelming Generosity, increasing the range of plague weapons by 6 inches. This probably is more applicable in the Terminators for the gauntlets. The Blightlords, they have quite better range on their weapons, and they don't have so many shooty plague weapons. In the shooting or fight phase, we can select Vermid Whispers, which is a Terminator specific stratagem. For 1 command point, the Terminators get +1 to hit. So this is really good, for example, for the Deathshroud. Attacking with the Cleave, they are only hitting on 3 pluses. With this, they would be hitting on 2 pluses. Then we have the Eternal Hatred. This is the previous Veterans of the Long War, giving us +1 to wound, but now it's costing 2 command points. Sickly Corrosion, which is a stratagem that could benefit some of the shooting units or fighting units that don't have so many plague weapons, doesn't make specifically sense for our Terminators. Nearly all the weapons of the Terminators are plague weapons. The only weapons that are typically not plague weapons are the combi bolters. It's mostly the combi bolters here, and the bolters can become plague weapons cheaper with virulent rounds instead of spending the 2 command points. When we come to the fight phase, we have the Crreping Blight. For 1 command point, the 6s to wound with plague weapons become AP -4. The Haze of Corruption is the stratagem where all damage when killing a model must be allocated. And then we have the Terminator specific Break Their Spirits for 1 command point, giving -4 leadership. After killing an enemy model, you can play this stratagem, and then the enemy unit is suffering -4 leadership, which might have a big impact on their morale checks. And then in the enemy phase, in the enemy charge phase, if you have Mortarion Salvil, remember the Relaptic Assault. For 1 command point, up to 3 units within 3 inch of the enemy unit that charged can make heroic intervention. So this could be interesting to bring the Deathshroud or Blightlords that are nearby a charged unit to come in and make a difference. As a reference, some of the most efficient damaging stratagems so far, looking at how many extra wounds are we getting for each command point we spend. So far I've analyzed the Plague Marines, the Poxwalkers, and vehicles. Some of the ones that stand out, the Mutant Strange Stratagem for a big unit of Poxwalkers can do a lot of extra mortal wounds, so 6.5 mortal wounds on average against any enemy unit. Bringing a footed blow drone with a mower into heroic intervention, allowing it to do its melee damage, is really good with the dark craving stratagem. So those are quite efficient for one command point. You can get a lot of extra wounds. The blightening is super good for 3 Plague Marines in engagement range. Here we have a champion equipped with a Plague Skull relic, can do 4.6 mortal wounds on average. Once per battle. For example, trench fighters, also quite good stratagem, giving you 2.5. And then there were a lot of different other scenarios and special cases where maybe the stratagems were not as efficient or something like this. So keep this in mind when we go through the damage output of the new the Terminator stratagems. Starting with the champions and the pre-battle upgrades, as we saw also with the Plague Marines, the Plague Skull of Clothilla relic for 1 command point once per battle. At the end of movement, you select an enemy unit within 6 inches, and you don't have to think about the lookout sir rule, and you roll 7 dice, 4s and 5s give mortal wound, and 6s give D3 mortal wounds. This gives 4.67 mortal wounds for 1 command point, and this is a good value and comes good in handy when you need to take out some pesky opponent, or for example the Catan Nightbringer comes to mind. So this is always interesting to consider. Equipping one of the champions, a Deathshroud or Blightlord champion, could be good because they have higher survivability than a Plague Marine champion probably. And then we have the Plaguebringer relic. So this replaces for 1 command point, of course. So before battle, you can select a model with a Bale Sword, like the Blightlord champion, and you can replace its Bale Sword with a Strength +2, AP -3, and importantly Damage 2 Plague weapon. And then every time a model is destroyed by this weapon, they count as 2 for morale. So they have a morale effect synergy with Break Their Spirits if you are fighting some unit and you kill the same one model, it gets 2 count as 2 for morale check, and then you have the -4 in leadership. Could be quite interesting combo against expensive models. Compared to the Bale Sword, the Blightlord champion would do 1 wound more on average for 1 command point with a relic per fight phase. So here you see the expected the Blightlord champion having 4 attacks with his Bale Sword in blue, and then the orange line is the Plaguebringer. So overall better. So average, the Blightlord champion will be doing 1.4 wounds across the 31 targets I'm typically simulating. With the Plaguebringer, he's going up to 2.4 wounds. So for the 1 CP we spend, we get 1 extra wound on average per turn for this command point. But as you saw, it's not one of the highest efficient stratagems, but it could be a thematically interesting one to break the spirits with additional morale breaking Plaguebringer. And then we come to one of the best relics and very good for Deathshroud. This is replacing the Man Reaper of the Deathshroud champion with the Reaper of Glorious Entropy relic for 1 command point. And the weapon is strength ×2, so it becomes a strength 8 weapon, AP -3, damage 3, flat 3 damage. It's a plague weapon, and unmodified 6s to wound give additional mortal wounds. And this is really good. Here you can see the Deathshroud champion attacking with his normal Man Reaper with a cleave profile in blue. So here he's hitting on 3 pluses because it's -1 to hit. Here I add reroll 1s on the yellow line, improving it a little bit. But here you see the damage he's doing with the Reaper of Glorious Entropy. The flat 3 damage is helping, and he's hitting on 2 pluses. And you also have the unmodified 6s, gives a couple of mortal wounds here and there. And the gray here is when you add the reroll 1, so you can really boost the damage of the champion. Deathshroud champion becomes a very strong character on his own. And can do really loads of damage here. So you see the Deathshroud champion by himself with his normal weapon would be doing 3 wounds on average across a multitude of targets. When he has the Glorious Entropy, he is getting 7 wounds on average. So we're getting 4 4 extra damage on average for 1 command point every turn the Deathshroud fights. So if he's fighting a couple of turns in the game, 2-3 turns in melee, you really get a very good payback for your 1 command point spent. Here you see the damage with the reroll, it gets even higher. And here I'm comparing the Lord. If I give the Lord of Contagion, replacing his Plague Reaper, and with the Glorious Entropy, he's doing the same amount of damage with the Glorious Entropy, but his Plague Reaper is better than the Deathshroud Champion's Man Reaper. So we are gaining much more by upgrading the Deathshroud Champion's weapon rather than the Lord of Contagion weapon, which was a mistake I took in my first list. I gave the Relic of the Glorious Entropy for the Lord of Contagion, and the Lord of Contagion, of course, cannot have rerolls if you don't take the Warp Insect Hive, but then you cannot combine it with the Glorious Entropy. So, all in all, long story short, the Reaper of Glorious Entropy can be really, really good on the Deathshroud champion, making him like a super strong hero character for only 50 points. So this is really interesting, and 1 command point. Now let's look at the virulent rounds in the shooting. The virulent rounds are the max applicability would be if we have a squad of 10 Blightlord Terminators, and we also have Arch Contaminator, and all of them are equipped with combi bolters. So the virulent rounds makes the bolters to become plague weapons, then you get reroll 1s to wound, but then if you have the Arch Contaminator and you're shooting 12 inches, you would reroll everything to wound. And 10 combi bolters would have 40 shots, and this is the maximum effect you could get from virulent rounds. The biggest squad of Plague Marines will only outputting 20 bolter shots, so it's better to, if you want to go bolters, it's better to utilize the virulent rounds on the Blightlords rather than Plague Marines. But here I'm also adding the comparison where in the squad of the 10 Blightlord Terminators, 2 of them are equipped with Blight launchers for plus 10 points. The upgrade to a Blight launcher only costs 5 points for the Blightlord Terminators. And here we have the blue line is the 10 Blightlord Terminators with combi bolters. The orange line a little bit better is just by the virulent rounds, and then we have the gray is if we combine the virulent rounds with the Arch Contaminator, so shooting within 12 inches, unfortunately not at full range of 24 inches. And then we have in the yellow line we have the 2 Blight launcher guys, and here you see the figures. So the average damage here with the bolters, 5 wounds on average from this big group of Terminators, that's costing us 400 points, don't forget. So 5 wounds for 400 points, it's quite expensive. If we only take the virulent rounds, we are only getting not even 1 wound extra on average. If we add the Arch Contaminator, we're getting 2.5 wounds on average on the bolter, so that's starting to make a good sense here. And then here we see the 10 Blightlord Terminators with 2 Blight launchers is getting 6 wounds on average for 10 points more every shooting round. This is important to remember. And if we have the Arch Contaminator with the Blight launchers, they don't help. Here in this case, they don't help the combi bolters, but they will be doing 6.3 wounds on average. So 1.3 wounds every time this squad is shooting. So as I said, it's more efficient to use the virulent rounds for a big unit of Blightlord Terminators compared to using it to a Plague Marines, because we have up to double amount of shots being affected by this stratagem. The Arch Contaminator, for added benefit within 12 inches, makes a decent extra 2.5 wounds damage on average, but the Blight Launcher, as always, for a few points more per weapon, is also an alternative for higher damage output for no additional command point cost. And it's useful for multiple rounds of shooting. Looking at the Plague Brewers, if you go Mortarion's Sons, of course the Blightlord can take 1-2 Spewers in a big squad, but let's look at the effect. The best effect we can get with this if we use it on the gauntlets for the Deathshroud. So here I'm looking at, let's say, a case where I have 5 Deathshroud Terminators, not 6, so we avoid the blast rule, but 5 Deathshroud Terminators, and the champion is equipped with a double gauntlet for 5 more points. So here we will have 6d6 number of shots with the gauntlets. So quite a lot of shots, almost let's say 20 or so shots on average we should be getting here. And here you see the blue line, just the gauntlets with damage 1 shooting, and with the orange here we have with the plague brewers. So it's helping us, especially against the 2 wound models like intercessors. Here we can do almost twice the amount of damage here, or we are doing twice the amount of damage for 1 wound targets. It doesn't make sense. But here we see without the plague brewers, the average damage is 3.5 across the targets for this squad. And with the plague brewers, we're going up to 5 wounds across all the targets, so 1.5 extra damage per command point. So it's not like the best, let's say, output, but if you're building a Mortarion Suns, then it could boost your damage. And I guess it would make sense if you're going Mortarion Suns to utilize this stratagem and to build some list with spewers and gauntlets. And the gauntlet would probably be interesting to use it upon, especially if you are fighting 2 wound targets. Here the effect is almost 2.5 wounds for 1 command point spent. Then the overwhelming generosity for 1 CP adds 6-inch range to plague weapons. Here I'm looking at the 5 Deathshroud Terminators again, the champion with a double gauntlet, giving 6d6 shots. And this would, as I said, the Blightlord Terminators, it doesn't make sense. They have good range with most of their weapons, so it makes more sense to consider using it for Deathshroud Terminators. The gauntlets only have a 12-inch range. With this, we can do an 18-inch range if we are in a situation where the Deathshroud cannot shoot their weapons because they are too far away from something. So if you are at 18-inch, the target, they cannot shoot. You get 0 damage output out of them. If you use the overwhelming generosity for 1 command point, you would be able to do 3.5 wounds on average. So for the 1 command point, it could be worth it to get a little bit extra damage on the table. So if your big unit of Deathshroud don't have a target within range to shoot at, it could make sense to use 1 command point on overwhelming generosity and get 3-4 wounds on average across the various targets. Now going to the Terminator specific, the Vermid Whispers. For 1 command point in either fight or shoot phase, the unit gets +1 to hit. So this can be quite interesting. So this could be applicable and helpful for Blightlord shooting. They normally hit on a 3+ ballistic skill, but now with this stratagem they will be hitting on 2+. The Blightlords fighting, again, they normally would be weapon skill 3+, but now they will be hitting on 2+, getting a lot of extra hits in. And the Deathshroud fighting, if they are using the cleave profile and negating the -1 to hit, still hitting on a 2+. The Deathshroud have a 2+ weapon skill, but with the cleave profile of their Man Reaper, they are hitting on 3+. With the Vermid Whispers, they are back to hitting on 2+. And of course, if we add some rerolls to that, we are basically hitting everything. So no sense for the Deathshroud shooting the gauntlets, of course, because those weapons are auto-hit. Or the Deathshroud, if you are fighting a horde and you're using the scythe profile, they are already hitting on 2+, so the +1 to hit doesn't stack to go to 1+, unfortunately, let's say. So here we see the 10 Blightlord Terminators shooting their combi bolters. On average, they will be doing 5 wounds. If we add the +1 to hit with Vermid Whispers, we will be doing 6.3. So here you see the extra damage. For the shooting, you can get 1.5 wounds depending on the loadout. Here I take 2 Blight Launchers in the Blightlord Terminator squad. Here we only have combi bolters. If we have it in the fight phase, the 10 Blightlords, here I'm looking at a melee-oriented big group with 2 flails and then axes for the rest. So here we will be going from 14 wounds on average up to 18 wounds on average. So 3.6 extra wounds damage for command point. And here we have the 5 Deathshroud with the cleave profile. They will be doing 13 wounds on average with the Vermid Whispers, 16.5, and then also 3.5 wounds extra for the command point spent. So as we can see, the Vermid Whispers is most impactful on a large unit of either Blightlords or Deathshrouds in melee phase, and we are getting 3.5 wounds for the command point we are spending. So definitely consider this when you're up against maybe some high value target where you think in melee you cannot take them out with this very high base damage that the Terminators will be doing. If you add rerolls to this, of course, you can get even better numbers. So the internal hatred, the new veterans of the long war, but now costing 2 command points in the fight or shoot phase, you get +1 to wound. The Deathshroud melee weapons, yeah, mostly when we are fighting and we in melee and we are having the contagion helping us, normally the +1 to wound would, of course, would be helpful, but relatively more for the low strength weapons. So here I'm looking at the same squads again, the Blightlord Terminator shooting. We are getting, for the combi bolters, there is quite a good effect of Eternal Hatred, but unfortunately it's costing 2 command points. So we are getting here 2 wounds for the stratagem more on average, but it's only 1 wound per command point. So we are spending 2 command points here to achieve this effect. And in melee, it doesn't really give us super good effect. We're getting 1-2 wounds more. So with the Eternal Hatred, we can squeeze out a bit of extra wounds, both at shooting and melee phase. But however, at 2 command points, we are not getting a lot of bang out for our command points. So I'm missing the old veterans of the Long War, which was, of course, cheaper and was doing the same thing. So in the fight phase now, the Crreping Blight for 1 command point, a melee attack with a plague weapon, unmodified wound roll of 6 becomes AP -4, and this is typically useless against targets that already are saving with their invul saves, or they don't have good armor saves. Then you don't. This AP doesn't help you really, and it's a very little effect for weapons with high AP. For example, the Man Reaper Cleave already is AP -3, and here I run the numbers here. And the biggest effect is if you are using the scythe profile of the Deathshroud against some horde, you're getting, but it's not super fantastic either. You're only getting 1 wound on average here. Here you see the blue line is the Deathshrouds with the scythe profile. They have a very big number of attacks, and then we add the Crreping Blight. It only affects a little bit of the attacks, and mostly the targets here that don't have invul save, but they have a decent save. For example, here save 3+ or 2+ with no invul saves. The targets with invul saves are not really affected by the AP -4. So the Crreping Blight doesn't seem to do very much either for our Plague Marines or our Terminators. So it could be some of these stratagems that you don't need to remember that we are having probably. So the Haze of Corruption for 2 command points, allocating all damage when a model is killed in the fight phase and a core unit. We saw the Haze of Corruption was good for the Plague Marines that have Plague Cleavers with D6, potentially be able to kill 2-3 models with 1 good hit, or the Mace of Contagion that has a damage 3 weapon, etc. But the Blightlords and the Deathshroud, their standard weapons are either damage 1 or damage 2 weapons, like the Flail and the Cleave profile of the Man Reaper. The damage 1 is the Bale Sword, the Axe, etc. Of course, the Deathshroud champion could have the Glorious Entropy Relic, which is a damage 3 weapon, so you could consider it, but it's only 1 weapon out in the squad. So all this means that there is limited use for the Haze of Corruption on the Terminators, practically only for 1 wound type of targets. And the Deathshroud already have a way to deal with the horde type enemies. Their Man Reaper can use the Scythe profile for a very large number of attacks. So here I'm looking at our Blightlord Terminators and the Deathshroud fighting a big unit of Gene Stealers. Here we have the Blightlords with the Axe and the 2 Flails. So here the Axe doesn't benefit from the Haze of Corruption because it's damage 1, so there is no spillover damage. The only thing that could help is a little bit is the Flail. So instead of doing 4 damage here against the Gene Stealers, it would be doing 8 damage, so we'd be killing 2 per every unsaved wound. So, but because it's costing you 2 command points, you're only getting 2 extra wounds for 1 command point. So it's not super useful even in this scenario here. And here we see the Deathshroud with the cleave profile attacking this unit. They will be doing 21 hit rolls with their cleave profile, the 5 Deathshroud, and here they will be doing 9 wounds in damage. Here they would be losing 1 wound per each unsaved attack. With a Haze of Corruption, there will be up to 18 wounds, so that's a good benefit, but the Deathshroud could have used their Scythe, or should have used their Scythe profile instead, to get double the number of attacks, and then they would be doing 18 wounds on average against the Gene Stealers without having to use the 2 command points. So I think the Haze of Corruption is more for the Plague Marines with high damage weapons, and not so much for our Terminators. It's too costly, and we don't get a big benefit of the Haze of Corruption for the Terminators. Finally, Break Their Spirits for 1 command point. When a Terminator kills an enemy in the fight phase, if it's an infantry, beast, or swarm model, if you play this stratagem, the enemy unit gets -4 leadership. This can be good against some elite infantry units where you get a kill, a few models. They could have invul saves, they could be custodes or something like this, and you could potentially removing some expensive models if they fail their morale. Either you might be forcing them to use 2 command points to autopass, and this can only be used 1 per battle stratagem. So you are spending 1 command point forcing your opponent to use 2 to autopass maybe, or they have to use some other special rules or something. Or if they cannot do that because they already did it, you have a big chance that some expensive models are fleeing, like Eradicators or Terminators. It would be good to see a 40, 50, 60 point model being lost due to morale and maybe even combat attrition later on. Versus cheaper horde type enemy units, the effect is probably less significant. So if you can maybe get 1 or 2 guardsmen to flee, they don't cost so many points, but it could be crucial that you want to remove the last couple of objective secure models from an objective you're contesting. But in this scenario, it could be that the Terminators already have killed a significant number of models to not need this extra -4 leadership. As we saw before, a unit of Deathshroud using the Scythe profile can really do a lot of wounds and take out a lot of horde type infantry. So maybe this -4 leadership is not useful. In this table, I was just looking at the numbers. If the enemy unit's leadership from 6 going up to 10, like Necron Warriors here, and here is the chance to fail the morale test if we kill only 1 unit, and we play the stratagem for -4 leadership. There is a big chance for the leadership 6, 7, 8 that they fail their morale. Not so much for 9 and 10. If we have these enemy units, if we already kill for this unit 5 models, 6, 7, 8, 9. If we already kill a lot of models, then there is no point in using the -4 leadership stratagem on top. They are already only passing on a 1, and here is the number of models killed where the unit still cannot fail morale. So if we only, for example, kill 2 models from a leadership 8 group, they will not be able to fail their morale. Here we could spend the -4 leadership here and have a better odds of them failing. And then absolutely the final one, Relaptic Assault for Mortarion's Anvil for 1 command point, the specific stratagem of the Mortarion's Anvil play company, which is one of the very popular ones with good contagions, very good relic, and also this stratagem. So in the enemy charge phase, select an enemy unit that has charged and select up to 3 Mortarion Anvil units within 3 inches of this unit, and those units can make heroic interventions as they were characters. So this could be an interesting way to bring our Terminators in melee more often, and indirectly maybe protect a weaker Death Guard unit from being charged, because the opponent will be frightened to go in the jaws of the Terminators. I think most of the times, if you come in the situation where you can use this and you are playing Mortarion Anvil, I think you should use it. So here in this example, we have this blue unit charging, let's say, weaker Death Guard unit here in the middle, but they come within 3 inches of some units here. We play the Relaptic Assault, and then suddenly the Deathshroud and the Blightlords here come into charge phase. Of course, your opponent could be micromanaging this so that you don't come to 3 inches. So probably this is quite situational if it's useful or not. But if the conditions occur, if you play Mortarion Anvil, remember this, because as we saw, the Deathshroud and the Blightlords can do significant damage, especially in melee. So this table summarizes all the buffing stratagems and how much extra damage we're doing for the Terminators. So some of this pre-battle, as I said, giving the Deathshroud champion the Entropy Reaper Relic would give him 4 wounds more every time he fights for 1 command point. This is probably a steal and really good to include. The champion, the Plague Skull of Glothila Relic, also is a good one to give mortal wounds. The Plaguebringer Relic, less so for a Blightlord Terminator. Virulent rounds could be interesting with the Arch Contaminator with a big unit of combi bolters. And remember, of course, this is, for example, for 10 Blightlords. If you only have 5, then the effect is half of this on average. The Plague Brewers, not super overwhelming, but could help a Deathshroud with gauntlets. The overwhelming generosity can make a bit extra damage if our Deathshroud don't have anything to shoot at. Maybe they could do with this one, and then you get some nice wounds out of the 1 command point. The Vermid Whispers are mostly impactful in the fight phase, where our Blightlords and the Deathshroud are already doing good damage, and the Vermid Whispers with Deathshroud, if we also add rerolls on top, basically we're hitting on 2 pluses and rerolling ones, we'll be hitting really a lot. So a good benefit of the Vermid Whispers. Remember this stratagem when your Terminators are in melee with something you don't think you can kill. Eternal Hatred, +1 to wound, it costs 2 command points, and it gives not super good output for either our Blightlords or the Deathshroud in either shooting or melee. So not very. It's too expensive basically for what it does, and in melee especially, we are benefiting from the -1 toughness. We have quite good wound rolls. We are rerolling the ones to wound anyway, etc. So the +1 to wound could be situationally interesting, but it's 2 command points, a bit too costly here. Crreping Blight could basically mostly help the Deathshroud with a scythe profile, but already they're probably doing a lot of damage, so it's not a super good stratagem. The Haze of Corruption, not super useful for the Terminators, only at 1 wound targets where you probably already have the tools to take them out. They Break Their Spirit, -4 leadership to force maybe the opponent to use more command points on the autopass morale, or make the morale test fail, and it could be interesting to see some elite type of models fleeing the battlefield, seeing your Terminators. And then the Relaptic Assault for Mortarion's Anvil. If this situation arises, like with the 30 Blow Drone and the Dark Cravings, remember to use this and make your Terminators come into melee where they can do a huge amount of damage, at least if they are big units of Terminators here. So the summary and final thoughts. The ability to give relics to the Terminator champions seems very strong, especially giving the Reaper of Glorious Entropy to the Deathshroud champion. And of course, it's a better payout than giving it to the Lord of Contagion. And the Plague Skull of Glothila to any champion that can survive and use it seems very helpful. And I promise the Deathshroud champion to give him the upgrade, not of the Lord of Contagion, next time I play the game. So sorry, Deathshroud. Vermid Whispers for 1 command point, +1/+1 to the hit roll, is especially good for our Terminators in melee versus tough opponents, where you want to make any hit count. Good combo with Lord of Death card, reroll once aura. If you are getting them to hit on 2 pluses with rerolls, it means that 97 of your hits are wounding on average. The Virulent rounds is better for the Blightlords and for the Plague Marines. They have the potential to affect twice the number of bolter shots, but it needs the Arch Contaminator to do decent extra damage worthy of the command points, in my opinion. Or let's say, put another way, there are other ways to use a command point to get more damage than only Virulent rounds. With the Arch Contaminator, it starts making sense for the Blightlords. Overwhelming Generosity it's interesting to give the Deathshroud some targets up to 18 inch if they run out of targets to shoot for a couple of wounds. And if you have Mortarion's Anvil, definitely remember the Relaptic Assault for a situational possibility to bring your Terminators in melee so they can do their thing. So this concludes the video. What are your thoughts of the stratagems, and have you been using them? I can see now from my game I could have used the Vermid Whispers probably when my Deathshroud were attacking, or I could have used a couple of more stratagems, and as I said, probably give the Reaper of Glorious Entropy to the Deathshroud champion. Definitely will consider for my upcoming lists. So if you like this video, please press like and subscribe to the channel, where I will be bringing you much more Death Guard content going forward, and also other Warhammer army content and the relations to the Death Guard. If you want to support the channel more, support the efforts and the time consuming work to bring you all this math, please visit my Patreon page, where you can get a bit more exclusive comment and be able to affect the next videos and give input and ideas to the roadmap and join the community there. So with these words, General Yanis is signing out. Stay safe out there, and bye-bye.